Toren Pedway flips to the Gophers. Is in-state recruiting broken?
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Herrings. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. All right, so this happened a couple days ago, but Easter, and by the way, happy Easter to everybody who celebrated, everybody who was able to break bread with family and friends. Happy Easter. I hope y'all had an incredible Easter. Toren Pedway, in-state defensive lineman in the 2025 class, verbal commit, decommitted, and committed to PJ Fleck? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. What? I'm sorry. What?
I'm sorry. What? All right. So there's a couple things with this I want to talk about and break down. The first, the player. All right. Toren Pedway, 6'5", 240, defensive lineman. This is a player who has a USC offer, a Washington offer, Illinois, Nebraska, Minnesota, Wisconsin. Like, this is the recruiting offer list is actually pretty impressive by Toren. Really quickly, I think it's interesting to see USC and Washington offering in-state Wisconsin kids. Hasn't happened much in the past. I wonder if that becomes a little more common with the merger, right? With USC, those schools coming into the Big Ten. If you're going to see more offers from a Washington, a USC, an Oregon, maybe a UCLA flirted with Rob Booker, obviously. I don't know. I don't know if it's too soon to say trend or not, but that's interesting to me. But yeah, so Toren Pedway, it's a pretty good offer list. Good frame. I like the player. I talked about him with Justin when we did the show on Pettaway. I think we both like him. And it's at a position of huge need. Like the defensive line grouping, the defensive line depth chart on this team, the young talent on this team at that spot, it needs to get better. And you had an in-state kid, an in-state player with the measurables to play there, a pretty good offer list. And you got him. You got him assigned. And then he just really quickly, without a ton of smoke, flipped, which I don't think Wisconsin pushed him out. I don't know. I don't fully know on Pettaway why he flipped, but it's a player to spot a need. Like, you need defense. You need 3 defense linemen in this class, maybe 4. You need to rebuild that depth in that line. And this was a part of that plan. Obviously, they went after him pretty early. They got him. They secured him. I think the upside on Pettaway's relatively high. I think he's a little ways away from it, but I liked it. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat and say it doesn't matter. This was a commit that I liked. It's from in-state at a huge position of need, and he flipped to Minnesota. So I don't know. It's interesting. I wonder if potentially you had a new defensive line coach come in EJ Whitlow. I wonder if one way or both ways it wasn't, that relationship didn't take off. That could be Whitlow coming in and watching the film and not being in love, or it could be maybe Toren Pedway coming in and not the initial relationship, not really developing very well. And, maybe he had a better relationship with the Minnesota defensive line coach. I'm just throwing darts at a board here because the decommit and the immediate commitment kind of came out of nowhere. And it was to PJ Fleck and the Gophers. And it leads me into my second kind of question on this one with in-state recruiting, right? 5 years ago, this would seem unheard of to have an in-state player committed to the Badgers flip to Minnesota. Back when you think of the wall being up and Wisconsin getting the top player in the state every single year, right? Never missing on players they wanted, essentially. Like getting everybody, the 4 stars, the 3 stars, getting just about everybody that they really went after. I think they got the top-ranked player in the state every year, essentially. It just doesn't feel like whatever this current staff is doing in state, it doesn't feel like they found their footing quite yet, right? And you go back to like this year, you have obviously Flanagan and Straybe going to Notre Dame. Those are both players the Badgers went after. Last year, you had Nathan Roy to Minnesota, Sexton to Penn State. Those are both players the Badgers went after. Now you have Toren Pedway, who committed and flipped to Minnesota. Yeah, it's very odd to go for, a couple of years ago when this wall was up and no players, again, they didn't hit on every single guy. That's a misnomer. But most of the players they wanted they got in state. And now it feels very much like a crapshoot. And it has shifted really quickly, which I don't know if it's good or bad. It's interesting. On the basketball side, we rarely get the top in-state talent, and I don't think Greg Gard catches the flack that the football side gets when they lose players, and I think that's fair to point out. There is a discrepancy on expectations there, but I think there's a discrepancy for a bit of a reason. You need more bodies in football. You need more guys, and typically the in-state players have been they've been layups, right? They've been players that you can get relatively easy. They've been players that you don't have to put as much effort into the recruitment, and I think it gives you a base and a foundation because football is more of a numbers game than basketball. Basketball, you can get 2 guys in a class and be good. Football, you need 20 to 25 bodies. So being able to count on 3 to 4 to 5 layups, and I use layups in quotations. So you still got to recruit kids, but to be able to count on 3 or 4 or 5 layups in state every year was a nice luxury because no matter how big your recruiting staff is, no matter how big your NIL department is, no matter how powerful your athletic program, you still have a limit on how much time you have everybody has a limit on how much they can put into recruiting, how much energy they can put into something. So if you can land a couple guys relatively easy in state, it allows you to focus more energy in other spots. The out-of-state recruits are just going to be harder to land, right? It just requires more resources, more time, more communication, more effort. So I don't know. It's just interesting to me to see. And the staff has talked about it. I think Luke Fickell has talked about it recently with Jesse Temple and The Athletic. He did an interview. He talked about the importance of in-state recruiting. He talked about wanting to be better there. And then, a week or two after that, Toren Pedway flips to the Gophers. It's just interesting. And it feels like I don't think the staff doesn't think that Wisconsin's important. I don't think they haven't put good effort in. For whatever reason, it feels like they haven't found their footing yet. And it is the second year in a row. This is the other thing that's kind of interesting to me. It is the second year in a row the Gophers came in and took a key part of a Wisconsin in-state recruiting year, right? Last year was Nathan Roy. That's a player that a lot of people wanted. It's a player that coast to coast had big-time offers. Wisconsin absolutely wanted him. Minnesota came in and got him. And then this year they come in and they flip Pettaway. Now, it is early in this cycle. Who knows if Pettaway stays there? Last year UCLA came in or influenced Booker and got him to flip, and then Wisconsin ended up flipping him back. It's recruiting. Anything can happen. Maybe the Badgers stay on him. From a defensive line standpoint, I think the Badgers are in on a lot of really good players. I'm not torn apart by losing Toren Pedway, even though I liked him. I wanted him in this class, and you need bodies at the defensive line spot. I'm more just interested in the fact that Minnesota was able to come in and flip him a year after you lost an offensive lineman to Minnesota and an offensive lineman to Notre Dame this year and a tight end to Notre Dame this year. I don't know. It feels like I don't know if we're going to get back to where we were with in-state recruiting. And maybe that's not a huge deal. I don't know. It's something worth talking about for sure. Let me know in the comments if you think in-state recruiting is broken and if that matters. Like we lose guys in basketball all the time. Does it matter? If you're getting guys across the country that are equally talented, maybe it doesn't. I still tend to think you're going to be better off if you can get a couple layups, easier recruiting wins every year, and you get those from Wisconsin. And they have done that, like Cooper Catalano, Reski, right? They have gotten guys from in-state, but they haven't got all the guys they want. And I just think that's interesting to track and watch. All right, coming up, I had a really good comment, a really good chunk of comments from a guy named John who watches the show regarding Greg Gard. I'm going to go through them one by one and kind of talk about if I agree or disagree, because I think it's fair because I've been pretty vocal about I'm not ready to fire Greg Gard, but I should address some of the criticisms and just where I lay on those specific points and if I agree or disagree with some of those critiques that are being made. So that's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. Definitely excited to get into that. Today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at Gametime. Listen, Gametime, if you want to buy tickets to something, there's no reason not to go to Gametime. What are you doing? What are you going to the ticket office anymore for? What are you walking around on the street trying to find that guy who's pulling out tickets out of his coat pocket, right? What are you doing? Come on, it is 2024. Let's go. We have 3D printers. We have Wisconsin running the air raid, and we have Gametime for your tickets. This is the ultimate place to get your ticket experience upgraded, right? Last minute tickets, flash sales, whatever you want. The largest inventory of tickets you're going to find. Fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, and comedy that you want to get to. You can gift it to somebody. What a great gift. Give it to a friend. Give it to a neighbor. Give it to a family member. Go let them enjoy some entertainment on you, and you're going to get the best price with Gametime. You download the Gametime app, create an account, Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, you create the account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So I'm excited to do this segment because I've been pretty vocal about I don't think Greg Gard should be fired. Like I've been pretty clear on that. I don't love everything about it. I think there's issues he needs to clean up. But John sent me a message on Twitter. He listens to the show, really sharp guy. And he broke out like a really good list of things that he thinks we need to talk about, that he's critical of Greg Gard for. And if I'm going to be here and I'm going to talk about why I think Gard should stay, I think I should also address some of the criticisms, right? If I agree or disagree with them. And I'm very appreciative that John sent me this. I think it's going to be fun. We're going to go through them point by point. He sent me a 10-point list, which I think is awesome. And it's incredible. And it's super detailed. It's thorough. So again, I very much appreciate it. And let's chop them up. Let's see where I disagree or agree with somebody who I think is a little more sour on Greg Gard. Here's the first one. Failure to develop Connor, a CJ, and failure in the pick. I give Gard credit for picking up Storin in the portal, but by the same token, let's hold him accountable for a pick that didn't work. Yeah, it's interesting. So Connor, if we're going to talk about, if we're going to talk about Connor and whether or not Greg Gard developed him, or if we're going to hold him accountable, you recruited a player 2 years ago, right? That as a freshman played really well, and the next year kind of fell off a cliff to some degree, and he's gone. Is that a recruiting win? And I think you can argue maybe it is in the portal era. Like you got one really good year in a year you needed outside shooting. Connor probably won you a couple games. Now, the failure to develop, I think this is a fair criticism. I think it is a recruiting win, right? When you say, let's hold him accountable for a pick that didn't work. I don't know if Connor Sejan didn't work because he gave you one really good year. And in today's era of college basketball, getting one really good year might just be a win. And that might be all I don't know. I'm not going to say that pick didn't work, but let's talk about the failure to develop Connor. I think this point has merit. Now, I've said several times, Connor there's accountability on the player to play better. And there got to be a point where Connor just wasn't playing well enough to get minutes. And I think what Greg Gard missed, I think he missed the window to develop Connor's role on this team and in this rotation. And I think that needs to happen earlier in the season. Because, later in the year, it's too late to do that. Later in the year, he's had an injury already. The team has kind of had some ups and downs. The rotation's more set. He's struggled. I think it was too late to try to get him going. Early in the year, I think you had to give him a consistent 10 or 15 minutes and just say, we saw what you did last year. I believe in the pedigree that you have as a shooter. That's why we recruited you, and you need a more consistent role. And we're going to ride with you for a month or two. And if after a month or two of giving you consistent playing time, that shooting percentage still hasn't climbed above that 30% mark, that 25% mark, then okay, we tried. I don't think he gave it a fair shake. So on that point, I think that's a fair criticism, John. I think that's a good one. His next point is lack of transparency. Huge frustration to watch players play poorly and wonder if they were injured, and if so, how badly. He mentions Wahl in the last game, Chucky, very frustrating. We deserve to know. So I disagree slightly with this one. In fact, I disagree, I think, wholly with this one. I don't think he owes the fans I don't think he owes the fans additional details on injury statuses, on rotations, on practice. Like, I just think some injury stuff you got to be careful putting out there anyway. B, I don't know what benefit it does him. Like, it can give other teams additional information if they know somebody's hurt or somebody's nursing something. Maybe they attack that more. Maybe they exploit that more. I'm okay with coaches holding a lot of that information close to the vest. I really am. I don't think we deserve to know it as fans. So on this one, I think I would push back a little bit. Like, I don't think it does Greg Gard any good to discuss those injuries. And, hey, this guy's hurt, and this is how it's impacting him, and this is how we're going to try to adjust. I think you might just be giving information to other teams that they can use against you in their scout. So I would push back on that one. I disagree. His next point is for us to talk about the loss of Yalden, bad pick of Yalden, see comment on Connor. Yeah, this is a really good point. Like, Gus Yalden's a recruiting miss. Now, there's a lot of reasons probably why it happened, some of which I think I kind of know, some of which I don't. I don't think it's a talent thing with Gus Yalden. I'll just say that. They had a lot of other really good offers. He played really well in recruiting circuits. I talked to a lot of people who know recruiting and talent evaluation better than I do. I don't think it's a talent issue. So I think it's a recruitment that I'm glad Greg Gard went after. But if you recruit a kid and he doesn't contribute and then a year later he's gone, That's a recruiting miss. There's no other way to slice that. And at the end of the day, ultimately, the head coach is responsible for recruiting hits and recruiting misses. And part of recruiting, and this is something I've given Greg Gard credit for, but part of recruiting is finding the right cultural fits too. And for whatever reason, Gus Yalden, it didn't work this year. So that is a miss, and that's a good point. I agree with it. That's a recruiting miss. If you recruit a player, he doesn't contribute, and then a year later he's gone, that's a recruiting miss. And ultimately, I think players share our culpability in how they develop and how they mature and how they act. But ultimately, it's on Greg Gard, 100%. His next point is, Tyler was a gamer. That said, he and the Badgers failed to have him develop any kind of outside shot in 15 years. I'm sorry. I could develop an outside shot if you gave me 5 years. I'm not doubting you, man. John, I'm not doubting you that you could do it. But I'll say this. First of all, this one to me is not on Gard. It's not. I know fans want more player development, better player development. You harken back to Bo Ryan and some of the work he did. Some players never become shooters. And they just don't. So there's NBA players who never develop a shot. And a lot of times it's not for lack of trying. It's a lot of times bad fundamentals, bad footwork, bad form that's learned early on in their careers. And it's really hard to unlearn some of those habits, to unlearn some of that muscle memory. It's very difficult. It's easier to do it in practice. And then when the game starts, you revert to how you shot. There was a really good, I was looking this up excuse me. There's a really good, from Basketball Reference, they were looking at players who came into the NBA as rookies, played 30 games, shot the ball a little bit. So players that played as rookies, okay? And players that shot less than 60% from the line and didn't shoot threes. And then they went on to follow these 88 players. Only 15 of them became good three-point shooters. So of these 88 players in this Basketball Reference study at the NBA level that came in and didn't shoot very well but played, only 15 of those 88 at the NBA level developed. And they're getting incredible coaching and skill development coaches and time in the gym and every tool they could possibly have at that level. And 15% of them, 20% of them developed into better shooters over the course. Like, there's a point where some players are just not going to develop a jump shot, and that's not on the coach, especially the head coach. The head coach is not in there working with Tyler Wahl on a jump shot. I went to a coaching clinic once. They were talking about jump shooting, and the guy said it's really hard to fix form when it's become really ingrained. Not impossible, but he said it's like walking through a field of snow. And the first time you walk through, you make the path. And every time after that, you've walked on that path and you beat that path in. And then if your shot has been poor the whole time, which is your path, to go off that path takes a ton of work. And invariably, most players just veer back to the path eventually. It's the path that's their bad form, their bad shot. It's hard to break it. So do I wish he would have developed a shot better? Yep. Do I think he didn't try? No, I think he put in a lot of work. I don't put this one on Gard, though. All right, next one here. Loss of Store. That if he leaves and doesn't go to the NBA, it's a no vote of confidence for Gard and the Badgers. Let's talk about that, please. I disagree. This is one I'm going to push back on with you, John. I think there's a huge NIL element here. There just is. And if the numbers, I'm sorry, my camera's on focus. See if I can focus this in. I think there's certain players that are just going to command a lot on the open market, which is what NIL is now, essentially. This is kind of an open market. And I don't think Wisconsin is going to pay the top dollar. And if that's the case, and just go with me here, if that's the case, how can that be on Greg Gard, right? If he's not playing with the same coffers, and I'm not saying Wisconsin can't afford it. I'm just, there's a fiscal responsibility that you still have to manage rosters with. And there's points where you have to ask, just because we can spend the money, should we be spending this much on this player? And this is bigger discussions. This is no valuation discussion on AJ Store specifically, because AJ Store is not going to be the last guy somebody comes after that's wearing a Wisconsin jersey, and vice versa. I just have a hard time putting this on Greg Gard because I don't think from an NIL standpoint, we're going to match what AJ Store is looking for. And from what I've heard, AJ Store is looking for the most money he can make, which, by the way, is his prerogative, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's the system, and I'm not going to begrudge a guy for doing it. Absolutely. Go chase whatever opportunity you think is best for you in your life, young man. You were great at Wisconsin, and it was an absolute win-win. That being said, I'm not going to put this one on Greg Gard because I don't think the offer on the table is the same. I don't think it's at the same level. So I'm not going to put this one on Greg Gard. Now, do you think there's an element of Greg Gard and maybe people aren't buying into him, and that's impacting NIL, maybe to some degree. I think if you had Bo Ryan in here, I'm telling you right now, I think if you had Bo Ryan in here, you're still not matching top dollar for an athletic wing that scored 17 points per game. I don't think that's what Wisconsin's going to do. And quite frankly, I'm not sure they should. I don't know if it's a great investment. I think you can get players in here I hate to say salary is the wrong word, but I don't think you need to match top dollar for every player. I don't think that's fiscally responsible. I'm not going to put that one on Greg Gard. All right, coming up, we got a bunch more from John. Comments and critiques on Greg Gard, as I'm going to go back and forth on which ones I agree with, which ones I disagree with. And I greatly appreciate John reaching out to me with it. It is an excellent list. Today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at Amazon Fire TV. Amazon Fire TV is incredible. It's something I use. Again, I love being able to promote products that I actually use in my house. I got them plugged into 2 of my TVs. Okay, I got the Fire Stick in 2 of my TVs. Fire TV is your destination for sports, live games, highlights, in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire Stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies, TV episodes, free and live TV, whether it's opening weekend of baseball, which is now passed, and I love baseball, or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV also recently created Fire TV channels. Deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us over at Locked On. Who doesn't want to see more of me on your big screen? I mean, I don't want to be on your big screen. That's too much. That's too high definition for this face. But you could do it with the Amazon Fire TV, Amazon Fire Stick. If you want over at the Amazon Fire TV channels, you have to go check it out. Check out Amazon Fire TV channels on your TV or Alexa devices. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. It is your sports destination. Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Okay, let's keep banging these comments out because again, these are awesome, and I think a lot of these are very fair critiques. His next one here from John is failure to use the rotation to develop his team. You said from the start of this year that the Badgers were not deep. I did say that, and I do feel like I caught a bunch of crap about that, but I do also feel like I was kind of right about it. That said, Blackwell, McGee, Connor, Winter, Ilver, there was talent there. So I do think that there is something to this point, John. I am going to mostly agree with you on this one, and I'll go back to my Connor point. I thought there was a window to integrate Connor Essegian into this team and into this rotation earlier in the year, and you had to just stick with him for a little bit to see what would happen. And then if it didn't happen, fine. Like if you gave him 10 minutes a game consistently and he couldn't recapture his form from early last season, okay, he tried. I don't think he tried hard enough on that one. I've said before, I would like to see a few more minutes from some of the young guys just to see, but I also kind of wonder if some of these guys just aren't hits, right? I don't know if Ilver is going to fully figure it out. I thought Winter played reasonably. Blackwell played quite a bit. But I do think there's times, and I agree with you on this one, John. I do think there's times I wish he would let some of the younger players play more. He would have a little more flexibility in his rotation. So I do mostly agree with you on that one. This one is next comment here. I didn't see a consistent approach to getting these guys minutes. Oh, this is on the same one. I apologize. Gard's decision to do it the way he wants, but let's hear the darn thought process. Yeah, I agree. Consistent approach to getting these guys minutes. So I agree with you on that one, John. This is the next comment from John. Again, John submitted like 10 points, which I love. Thorough. I read all of it. I really appreciate it, John. He said the failure of Gard to get his guys to play hard consistently. Defense is about wanting it. I played, you played. I can play defense every practice and every game. The Badgers did not. Fair. I think that's a very fair one. The Badgers did not play hard enough at times defensively. And I think that was reflective of the scores. It was reflective of the opponent's shooting percentage. It was reflective of their pick and roll defense. Some of that's on the players. Like players have to be self-accountable. You have veterans on this team. You know if you're not playing hard enough. You know if you're not getting after it defensively. But some of it is on the coaches. And this ties into your previous point, John, which I think really is an important part of this season that didn't get talked about enough. Getting some of those other guys some more minutes allows your starters to play defense harder because they're not having to grind so much. So I think this is a very fair point. I don't think defensively we played hard enough this year. And I think if you talk to the players, they would probably say that too. I would think that they know they could have played a little harder, more consistently on defense. And at some level, that is on coaching at some level, because if your players aren't doing it, you got to find maybe a couple minutes for someone else who will come in and give them a break. Or maybe you got to sit somebody down for a few minutes and you take the short-term hit to hopefully light a long-term fire. So I do hear your point on this one. I think this one's fair. I don't put it all on the coaches because players, especially veterans, you know the standard. Like So I think there's an element of both on here, but I think it's a fair point. Next comment. His failure to develop Crowl. In his third year, it is not enough to show up sometimes and get his double-double. Good starting centers in the Big Ten give you the same dependable game night after night. I would disagree with this one. I don't think he hasn't developed Crowl. I think Crowl is kind of who Crowl is. And I know I say this a lot, and people are probably sick of it, but Crowl is who Crowl is. Crowl went from his first year, he scored, I have it up here, 8 points a game. Next year was 12. This year was 11. Rebounds have gone from 4.5 to 6.9 to 7.3. Crowl shot a career high in field goal percentage this year, 3-point percentage. His offensive analytics were the highest he's ever had. Ken Pom I think Crowl has developed. I just don't think he's made the jumps that people want, but I don't think those jumps are necessarily under the hood. It's like buying a good solid farm truck and then expecting it to go out and beat some car in a race. Like, I don't care what you develop under the hood of that farm truck. It's not beating, man, I'm not a car person. It's not beating a Mustang, right? So I think it's sometimes we expect more than Crowl should be. Now, I do think defensively Crowl regressed this year. The rim protection, which has never been a forte of his game, especially in the pick and roll, was not good. Synergy did not like it. And I think you can maybe talk to that. But I don't think Greg Gard hasn't developed Crowl. I think Crowl is just doesn't have quite the upside that people want. And then they point to Gard for not getting more out of that isn't really there to begin with. And for the record, I think Crowl's really good. I think he's a really solid, I think that's the word I would use, really solid Big Ten starting center. And he did get better this year, especially offensively. So I would disagree with this one. Next one. In-game coaching. I saw some things later in the year I liked, but was it consistently good? I think he probably gets more flack for in-game coaching than deserved, would be my guess. Here's the thing. Like, how many NBA guys are on this roster right now? Maybe AJ Storr, right? AJ Storr is going to test the water. Crowell's not really that. Wall's not that. Hepburn's not really that. Blackwell maybe in a couple years is like a 3-and-D wing type. Winter, it's way too early to tell. My point when I say that is this. On a team without elite talent, they were a 5 seed and beat Purdue. This team was pretty successful, and it wasn't successful because we just overwhelmed other teams with talent. So I think consistently, yeah, there's little things I don't love. I wish we would adjust a little bit more in game when a particular offensive action is eating us up. You look at the Illinois game with Damas, you look at some of the pick and roll stuff. I wish we would have a few more counters, wrinkles that we could throw at people. But I think there's also coaches that over-adjust, right? There's coaches that every time something doesn't work, they're throwing things out the window. They're trying new things on the fly. They're confusing players. They're putting too much on their plates, and then players are playing tentative. There is something to be said about believing in your system and continuing to harp those fundamentals. I think he did draw up some nice things in the game. I think we saw some new wrinkles there. You saw it in the Purdue game, right? A play to get Hepburn, kind of the ball coming off a wheel and getting downhill, scoring a layup there. I think he's a little better than people give him credit for in this aspect. So I'm going to disagree slightly here. Next one is who were these Badgers? I knew who the John Powell's Badgers were. He says, yuck. I knew who the Steve Yoder Badgers were. I also knew who the Dick Bennett Badgers were. And I knew who the Bo Ryan Badgers were. Gritty, hardworking. Who are the Greg Gard Badgers? I love this point. I absolutely love this point because this is a point I made after the season. I don't know what the identity of this team is, right? Was it offense? But if it was offense, we couldn't score against James Madison. It wasn't defense. Was it shooting? We were too inconsistent there. Was it post play? Crowl and Wall were hit or miss there. Was it great guard play? Not really consistently. There were points where Klesman and Hepburn just didn't score. Was it transition? No. Was it dominating the glass? No. There was always points where we'd be pretty good in one area and then it seems like we'd fall off in others. Our 3 players would be doing really well and 2 would be MIA. I just didn't feel like this team had a consistent identity you could point to. Like, I know this team's going to come out and do really well here. I can count on that. That's a coat rack I can hang my confidence on. And I don't think we got that this year. So I think that's a really good point, Brian. And those were the points. So I love this, man. Thank you. I said Brian. John. Thank you, John, for submitting all these comments. I think that was awesome. And a lot of really fair points. I'll also put this on here. He said, I really could have led with this, though. I think Gard is a fine man. I really love that he brought back the old B-ball coaches. He totally gets Wisconsin. Clearly his team loved one another, and that ain't nothing. fair comment to end on. John, thank you so much for doing that. That was incredible. I really do appreciate you reaching out to me with all those points. Toren Pedway went to Minnesota. What? Ugh. All right. Lots more content coming up this week. Thank you all so much for tuning in on Wisconsin, and we'll talk later.